A very good evening to one and all present here today. On behalf of the Shillong Law College IQAC team and all the faculties and students of the Shillong Law College, we would like to welcome the resource person for today. To begin with, we start first with Dr. Nena Gupta, VJ. She is, who is an assistant professor in the Department of English, Central University of Jammu and Kashmir. She has worked on the early poetry of T.S. Eliot and in the area of gender and feminist studies. Her research interests include contemporary women's writing in English and English translation, translation studies, American literature, the African American writings, the Native American and Chicago literature, and diaspora studies. Currently, she is working on folklore, Indian myths, and mythology fictions. We would like to welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Good evening. Thank you so much. And my heartfelt gratitude to the college and to the organizers, and of course to Dr. Regin, who has made it possible for me, and my dear friend Shubhra, who's part of this group, who has made it possible for me to be part of so many of your sessions. And I'm sure research is one area on which the more we know, the more we don't know. So also with that, thank you, and with the idea that this is the last day of the FTP, and I'm sure you are chock-a-block, up to here with so much information about research and how to write and what to do. I think I am just going to be repeating most of it, except I think the MLA style sheet, which all of us are sort of familiar with. So shall I begin my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
I
Please
can.
go ahead.
Okay, okay. Good evening, all the participants. Such a wonderful opportunity to be interacting with all of you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Evening, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
So the MLA approach to research and documentation is primarily what I'm sort of focusing on. But since research itself is such a big area, I just want to reiterate something that all of you have been dealing with. All of us are dealing with every day ever since we decided to do research after our MAs. And since I am from literature, so instead of touching upon the social sciences, I am primarily going to focus on the English literature research, or anytime any other other one of you, the faculty members who are researching on research or literature oriented research, then this will be more focused. So every time we are researching, the focus is originality, on newness, and untouched areas. We want to explore newer things, or we are visiting new old things from a new point of view. So, with this idea that we are now looking to research to do something a little new and where we can add a little originality, is something which takes us back to T.S. Eliot's, who is, of course, a great favorite of mine since I did my MPhil on his work. And it was his Wasteland, which sort of made me addicted to literature, because so much of brains and so much of research was required to even understand a simple poem like that. That when he says that, how can you have individual talent, and how does your individual talent fit into a tradition? So again and again, when we are doing research, we are now coming into the same old question of your tradition and your and individual research. And not only in our subjects, but in our day-to-day lives also, we are dealing with the same research problem. Actually, we are dealing with the same research problem. How much of newness can one add to an old civilization like India, and how much of newness is possible in the newer civilizations such as the US, and how much how do countries like Russia, China, India, the South Asian countries, and the Native Americans, the very old people, as well as Aboriginals, as well as Africans, the African nations, how do they, who are very, very old civilizationally, exist or remain new or renew themselves in this age? So, as an Indian who's working very much in India, every day I'm dealing with this problem, and it is a research problem. How do we take what we know, and how do we make it new so that it carries on and fits, the curriculum, fits the syllabus, the syllabi, fits the work, and encourages the skill sets, and gives the newer generation, my own children, students, scholars, young faculty members, me myself, how do we take forward what we know and what has been taught to us for centuries, and how do we take this knowledge forward, how do we make it new? But what does originality, what does newness, what do all these things mean? Now, exploration, generally, like we know that when Europeans started exploring the world, they discovered new continents, and they just went ahead and said that everything is new. Australia is new, America is new, what we know of Africa is new. Everything that is old is not to be known. And therefore, they have created a new world. So, is that what we mean by new? Is that what we understand by new? When we are writing an original poem, is does it have to have absolutely new words? Does it have to have absolutely new emotions? Or is it about rewriting the same old thing, and presenting it like old wine in a new bottle? Is that what we are doing? So every moment we are dealing with these questions. So of course, you the first and foremost, I'm sure you've gone through this again, but I'm just reiterating it: the research gap. As a researcher, I find this also a very, very difficult thing to do. So how do we find a research gap? Because, like in India, I find that, for example, I'm working on mythological fiction, and I find that mythology itself is not such a well researched area, and most of what we have is translations, retellings, and things like that, and it is not well researched, and it is just copy pasted from here and then. The research on it, the papers that are written on it, even the kind of information that we have about it, even the kind of arguments or debates that we have about mythology, mythological fiction, our epics, scriptures all over the world, all those things are based on a kind of an orality, a kind of an oral knowledge, a kind of a system that we know. It's a knowingness that is innate in us because of who we are. And then when we try to research, we come up against a very important block, which is that things that you believe in, things that you know to be the truth, you do not want to research. So, as we know, that modernism had created a very important um, uh, idea of universalism. There are certain universal truths. There are certain things that are universal, and those cannot be questioned. And then we have enlightenment itself, which, while modernism is being created out of enlightenment and saying that certain universals are there which cannot be debated, which are there everywhere in all societies, and structuralism sort of proves it. We still find that today in postmodernism, through enlightenment itself, we find that there is that's not true. That which were called universal values by the in the colonizers' language, to us it is known in English, mostly in English literature, that itself are just Eurocentric values. They limited to only a few Europeans. Even those who share the religion of the colonizers or the Europeans still do not share the same meanings. They still do not share the same comprehension. They do not. Their perception of the same thing is not is different. It's not the same. So, how do we carry on researching always? So, first and foremost, for any researcher, reading, 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 And the as you become a researcher, reading and not noting down is a primary, or it is a kind of a cardinal sin. You cannot read and not collect information and not reference it. Everything that you read, every book that you read must be collected in your bibliography as sort of books read. And that is where most of us who have been reading since childhood, we have a lot of knowledge, but we don't really know how to use it, how to reference it, how to use it as part of our research. Because whatever we think, whatever we are thinking, whatever I'm saying today is part of what I've been reading, whatever I've been collecting information. But maybe I do not have the sources, I don't know from where I've collected all this. So after you read and review all the literature that one has read over a particular topic, or generally over English literature, or anything that you want to study, you find that you have sort of come to focused on a point that where you find you suddenly come to a standstill. There's a kind of a blank. You have not found much material on that, and that is where your mind picks up the signals, and that is the area that you've decided is going to be something on which you're going to work. So, like I found that being popular fiction, mythological fiction is sort of either it is very interesting, people are reading it, but the ones who believe in the religion, or who believe in the text from which this fiction has come, they think that you are playing with it, and those who are against too much of a pastness of a past, they feel that mythological fiction is taking us too much to the into the past. So I found that there was this gap between the cannot and can, should not and should. And so I was exploring the gap to see how much work one can do in this fiction and where one can reach. So, as I said, increasing your references, how much you read and how much value you give to your paper. I mean, this is a term that I'm just using because I think any thesis, any paper, anything that you write is a collection or series of papers. So now plagiarism has become a huge thing, and whatever we read, how do we use it? When we use it without acknowledging it, when we say that, we just say it because that's how an oral culture builds up. We are all part of this oral culture in which we listen to things, we listen to our parents, to our friends, to teachers talk lecturing in the class, and we understand that what they're saying is something that we can just borrow and we can just write, but sometimes what they're saying in class is also original. So if you have not come across that kind of idea anywhere else, you can always refer even to a class teacher's lecture saying that that is where you got your idea. So acknowledging each and every idea which has given you your idea is the most respectful way of approaching research. And it's not that we don't want to acknowledge, it's just that in our in our school work, in our college work, in our even right till our MA work, we read so many books. When, for example, if we read a text like Mrs. Dalloway, and then we read about 10 articles on it, 10 research articles on it, attend the lectures in the class, we just collate the entire material, and that has become our strength. That's become the way we work. We just collect the material and we just write our answers, and the whole amalgamation of all those ideas is very well argued. It gives us new insights, it has made us understand that work, it also helps us understand other work. But the problem over here is that all our 15, 17 years of schooling have just taught us to take everything that we know together and lump it together without trying to understand who said what. Except I think in some very primary classes, the teachers do ask this question: who said it and to whom and why? So those basic questions are, something that we always need to acknowledge. The basic, what gave you the idea for the research? So reference is a way of acknowledging that we have taken the idea, quotation, words, anything from a source or person, which is the beginning of a kind of a methodology, research methodology, that this is what we have to do. We have to research on a particular idea, but what gave you the idea? So many times in essays, in interviews, in general stories, also in creative writing, people acknowledge that as I was walking along the road, I met an old woman and she looked at me with such love that is where the idea of this story came to me. For example, Valmiki in his Ramayana, says that he was, as he was meditating one day by the river Tamsa, he saw these birds, mating, and they had a nest, and their chicks were there, and then a snake comes up and eats takes away the eggs before the chicks have hatched. The eggs have hatched, and the snake takes away the eggs, and so he feels that the snake is a sinner. Then he follows the snake, and he finds that the snake has taken the eggs to feed his children. And by the time he comes back, he finds that a hunter has killed the male bird, and the female is left alone. Now she has no children, and she has no mate, and she's heartbroken. And then he follows to see where the hunter, he follows him to admonish him about why has he killed innocently a bird. Then he finds that he has killed the bird to um, assuage the hunger of his uh, wife and child, who have been hungry for very long. The child is is starved. So then Valmiki has acknowledged that this story made him think about the world, and the idea of um, what binds us all together to take the kind of actions that we have to take. So while the hunter is not wrong to look after his family, yet he is wrong to have killed a mate and of a bird, and that family of bird and the eggs is taken away by the snake. So he is acknowledging the fact that something gave rise to a feeling of heartbreak, of such sorrow in him, that he wanted to use that Karuna Ras as the basic Ras for his Ramayana. So anything as simple as that, and the muses, we've seen that in epics, muses are acknowledged, God is acknowledged. So in ancient tradition also, the authors acknowledge that there is a source beyond their own. It is only the enlightenment where the mind becomes so important that suddenly we start seeing that our mind is producing all these new ideas, and it's a wonderful organ. And because our mind is capable of producing new knowledge as if it's a kind of a magic box, that is why we have the idea of the genius. So the enlightenment idea of the mind being the only source of knowledge, a primary source of knowledge, we have understood that the mind has a kind of a synthetic imagination. It is a beautiful thing, and the romantics also say that the idea of the genius blossoms in the romantic age. That some people have such a beautiful imagination, such a beautiful mind, that they are able to take knowledge from here, there, and spin it into beautiful stuff. But we have to thank the post-structuralists for stopping there and saying that most of what we know is intertextuality. Most of the time, what we are doing is using ideas that we have read, that we have heard, that people are using around us, and those ideas become part of our information. And the brain uses those ideas and processes those ideas, connects it with the newer things, as Coleridge says, and produces new things. So that is how creativity comes. So in everything that we do, there is always an acknowledgement that yes, there is something or somebody that has helped us, that has inspired us, and we are taking this help. I know for a fact that it's not the idea. Plagiarism is not the idea that you just want to copy from anywhere or anything. Sometimes it is so difficult to find the sources. You've got the information, somebody said it, but you don't know which book it has come from, which author it has come from, and therefore you just say it, and later it so happens that you've taken it from a book, and your memory is so good that you just remember it, but you don't remember the author. And lo behold, we are now sinners, and we are plagiarists. So it is against this very, another cardinal sin that we have to work. So we have to refer everything and anything to understand that intertextuality is a wonderful thing in a creative text, but in a research article, it needs to be acknowledged. So any blog that has given us an idea, and luckily for us, now we can just copy and paste the sources, and we are done. All we have to do is acknowledge. We don't have to, and research is not creative. We do not have to show that this is our idea or we did it. We only have to understand that the research gap is something that we have identified. Oh, there is no work on this. And then we are not making anything new. We're just taking ideas. And in literature, we are even taking the text that somebody else has written. We are taking things that other people have written, and we're just acknowledging it. So here I am always reminded of these legal cases that we see so much, and I'm very fond of these books, like right from Perry Mason to Grisham, and now so many of these movies that come on the series that have come up about law, in which you have to tell, you have to cite the case, you have to cite the precedent, you have to cite the judgment, and say that according to so and so and so and so, this has happened, and therefore according to this article we can do this. And well, if the judge gives a new judgment, then that becomes a precedent, and you have to quote that. That's all. Without taking that tradition into account, you cannot have newness. That's all. So that is how, um, in the Western culture, in the colonizers' culture, in the English literature or the English law, or everything that we have a kind of a sustained, continuous tradition, which has come ever since the printing press has allowed things to be written, or ever since writing has been invented and manuscripts have come into being. So the idea, even in oral text, the people will acknowledge that I heard this from so and that one heard it from so and so. That acknowledgement is always there. So it is not something new that we are doing. So the whole thing is to always get the source. Now, the basic texts are the primary sources, and the additional material that we do, this we've seen when whatever we've been reading, primary and tertiary sources, are again notes on the primary or the secondary material. So we've chosen an area, we have done a literature review, we found the research gap, and we've now begun a chapter or a paper or a thesis, and then comes to our originality and our own thinking, in which we are doing nothing but taking ideas from others. So we may use the citation method of the MLA, the APA, Chicago, Harvard. For today, we are using the MLA handbook, which is the 9th edition. And this is so comprehensive that I've just copied the chapters here, that it gives you detailed understanding about how to format the manuscript, how much margins there have to be. And it has given complete writing advice. So when sometimes we're looking for academic writing papers or academic writing, sometimes we're looking at lectures on academic writing. This particular MLA style sheet is so comprehensive that it tells you what to do about punctuation, what to do about spelling, how to go about writing, what about the clauses, what about the where to put a comma, where to put a full stop, and when you're using multiple citations, each and everything has come in the second section also of writing advice. Now, most importantly for research work is principles of documentation. And when we have the source, when we have the intention to to cite the source, when we have all the references written down, and it's all there on our in our folders, yet we get tipped out about commas, full stops, italics, and things like that. So all those little details are given here, as including the notes and the appendices. This is American spelling because it is MLA appendixes they've written. So see, this I've again copied that whole image, that you must have a half-inch margin there for the pagination. On the left, you have a 1-inch margin. Top, you have a 1-inch margin. You have an indent of half an inch. Now, these things were there for the typewriter, but luckily for us, our laptops do most of that work. So the margination and how to write, where to write, which side to write, everything is explained, and including double space. Then the heading also, so beautifully done. Heading level 1 is bold. Then second level can be changed. So today the audio visual um, concept of learning has made it so clear that our eye catches these differences quickly. So if you have the heading levels separate, the headings, the subheadings, and the subheadings in different font or in different color, then you see it catches your eye. And it's very easy to identify on any page, anywhere, when you're writing, what is a major heading, what is a major subject that we are studying, and what are the subheadings. So even here, see, in work cited, they've given you exact presentation. Half an inch from the top, page number, work cited 1 inch, and here you have um, the first line is clear and the second is indented, and again the second line of the bibliographic detail. So this is a very, very comprehensive text, and of course I think it's there on the internet. It's as a PDF, you can always access it. So this is now our Bible. We do have to, if we're using the MLA, then this is what we have to read every time. So we have citations which are in text citations, which are very problematic sometimes. And we have works cited list that we have to always work out. So basically, when we are citing something in quotations which are of less than 3 lines, we have to write the surname and the page number within double quotation marks, as it is given here. The second detail. When you are giving an more than 3 lines and you want to now, that has to be indented paragraph within a, sometimes they ask for a separate font, indented, and the quotation, I mean, this, the punctuation marks. Most of the time, even now, I find my scholars, I'm sure you are not doing it any longer, the full stop comes before the page number or the citation. So these, very tiny little details are what really mar our work. We've done such a lovely job. We've done a lot of research. We've done a lot of work, but then we trip up on all these full stops and commas and italics. So work cited list for a book has to be in alphabetical order. This is, I think, the easiest of the lot that we, introduce, write like this, the book and the publisher. These days, we have done away with the place in the 9th edition, the 8th edition. We do not write the place of publication and the year of publication. Then, in the case of a chapter, we know that there is in double inverted commas, we have the name of the chapter, then the name of the book. Now, this is another mistake that even I used to make, because in the early MLAs, Encyclopedia of Philosophy, full stop used to always be, writing, and earlier the editing, the book is edited by a separate editor. So I used to always be confused about this little bit, whether we should write the editor there or, or write a full stop. But here it's very, very clear. Since I've learned it also, so I'm just sharing it with you. It's running, Encyclopedia of Philosophy, edited by Donald M. Boschert, and you have Macmillan Reference USA, all running. Only after the page number of the chapter you have the full stop. So whenever we are looking at the citation in a hurry, sometimes we just copy paste from somewhere, and there also there may have been a slight mistake, or when we recopy, we miss out on the full stop or the comma. So these things have to be absolutely firmly printed in our heads when we are going through the citations in our chapters again. So if there are more than 3 authors, 2 authors we add, and for 3 authors we are writing at all. And again, as you see, edited, that's all in running, and the full stop comes at the end. So when we have a page or an article on a website, then all we have to do is now, just like a book, we have to write the main name in italics, again running right up till the end. Everything has to be in commas, and we write the name of the media house, we write the date, we write the URL address, and then the full stop comes right at the end. There is a first full stop here after the article, and the second is right at the end. It's gone here. So collaboration assisted reflections on an open market and anonymous donation. This is the journal article in a database, and here is the review volume. Complete again. Here you have a full stop after the pages, and JSTOR, this is the name of the database. So here there is a break till the page numbers, you have a full stop, and after that you now add the other address. When we take an article or poem, most of the time we are taking our poems from these websites these days. We don't have so many of the poems that we read in print. So again, all we have to do is write the address of the website, and the date or the of access we do not have to write any longer. Now sometimes Twitter and blogs are also now included in citations. So here, if it is separate, the second name first, the surname, the name, and if that person is writing using another account name, then you have to put it in parentheses, and here you have always the name of the article is followed by a full stop, and then you have Twitter, the date, and then you have the address. Now, when they're similar, then there's no need to change it. Here you have Instagram, the date, then you have this place. So if you do not use the URL and you access it, then see the as I'm going along, what you will understand is that the whole point of the exercise of citing the source is the ease of finding it. The entire exercise, that's why I was just running through the citation, is the ease. How will you, it's not about us citing it. Since we are writing for an audience, we are writing for readers, we are writing to put our ideas clearly in front of people, and we want to tell them that this I have taken from somebody, which is an acknowledgement. It's just a polite way of saying that I'm not saying it, somebody else has said it, so I'm using their quotation or I'm using their idea. So how will the reader find it? So the entire idea of citing is for the sake of the convenience of the reader, and therefore you have the alphabetical order, and then most of the time we are using the surnames, and then again anything else that comes after the author shall come in parentheses. So now again for the government or institutional sources, we have again, since it's not a single author source, so whoever has written it, the Government of India, United Nations, again italics is the name of the report, and then whoever may have published it, could be the government press, it could be Sahitya Academy for us, it could be Taylor and Francis. Now sometimes now the MLA has printed this. It's a complete association. So since it is the publisher as well as a writer, therefore the name of the report comes first. Now, the Association of Specialized and Cooperative Library Agencies has published this particular text. So here it is again in italics, and the date of publication is very important. And the name of the publisher is very important. Why? Obviously, anytime you want to access that, you want to get it, this is an old established norm. Whenever you want to get it, you have to approach the publishing industry, you have to approach the publisher to get another copy where it will be available. So it is in this sense that we need to know the publisher and the date very clearly. Then again, when there's a whole department involved, then Department of Defense or roadways, whatever department is there, whatever they may have got published, because it's not a single author, it has been compiled, it's a compendium sometimes. So you just write down again the names, and always in a descending order. So United States, Congress, House. And this is again an internet website citation. So translation has become a very important aspect of writing. So I've just thought that I'll come right to the end. That when we translate something which is equally understood in English, like the grand passion at the end in Jane Eyre, we needn't translate it. But otherwise, nowadays we are using, because we are using so much translation, we are using so much, so many of us are translating. So many of us are working on folk literature, on comparative literature of different languages. Therefore, translation becomes very important. So whenever we, some of my scholars are also, struggling with this. They have work which has not really been translated into English, but they are using certain books in translation and certain books they're using which are not translated. So how to combine the two? That is one of the problems that they're facing. So obviously, sometimes the translated text, you have to make sure that you are translating. So this is an MLA, which is giving us an idea how we can cite our own translations or our own translated texts. So again, you find that you have the original. This is a big problem when we are doing our own translation sometimes. So you have this in Latin, and then in brackets you will have a dark wood, and from where after that the citation of the Latin comes here. Then translation in single quotation marks, not in parentheses. Here is you can take it out of the parentheses, and you can say double quotation marks is Latin, single quotation marks is a translation again by the translator. So the order of the citations is determined by the order of quotation and translation. If the original language quotation appears first in your prose, so it is all ease, it is all precedent. Where you, if you put your own first, I mean the translation first and the original second, then that's how you have to carry on throughout, because there's a kind of order, there's a kind of a logic to why you put the English translation first and the original language translation later, or why you it's vice versa. So whichever way you've started, you follow the same pattern: ordered quotations, translations, and their citations consistently, because it's an aid to your reader. Again and again, the citations, the the paper that you're writing, the idea that you're presenting, is for the sake of clarity to the reader. So as a writer, it's a duty, as a presenter, it's a duty to be as clear as possible and say that this is what I'm telling you, but this idea is not mine. This is something I've taken from somewhere else, and I'm just presenting it for you. So when you're translating yourself, so you have to write insert my translation, trans, the abbreviation, in place of a source. So here you say you've translated, here in the parenthesis my translation, and this is the page where you put this. This translation is not a book. You've translated a text which has not been translated earlier. So again the same way, double for the original and single for your own. Now notes. Endnotes are again very important. This is for translation. The endnotes. Sometimes when you find that your translation in the in-text citations is becoming too cumbersome, and you want to say something, you have to clarify. So the mantra for research and research articles is clarity. Anything, and while you are editing also somebody else's papers, you are editing your scholars' papers or students' papers or something, we find that there's a small point which is not clear. Now the whole idea is, if it's not clear, it has to be worked on again, and we identify why is it not clear. You use a particular term. I mean, a scholar has used a particular term, I don't know it. I've used a particular term, the person who's my editor doesn't know that term, so he'll revert to me and say, please explain this term. So if we want to avoid repeated corrections and repeated um, I mean, it's a lot of time wastage, then we must always, whenever we use a new term, whenever we use a term which is not in circulation, which is not very common, we must write a note, or we must explain it through translation in text citation or endnote. So anywhere when you find that, you can also write, make endnotes if you feel that it is interfering with your uh, with the stream, with the the flow of the text. Sometimes when the citations become too much, in text citations become too much, they break the flow of the argument, they break the flow of the reader's thoughts also. So there the endnotes come in very useful. Now this is the next thing. If the quotation is is a block, like earlier in the prose quotations, then um, I put this at the top, quotation mark to mark. This is the end note. This is the note in the MLA, and here it begins in the middle of things. Here these are the different lines of the translation, and here is the English translation. So you can put this and block together. There's no need to make write quotation marks there. So now second is indirect sources, like this was quoted, and now so many times we are reading sort of secondary material. Like for example, if I want to understand more about deconstruction, I'm reading, I find that I cannot really quote the reader, because it's so difficult for me. I have to take, of course, the translator, either Spivak, or I take somebody who's explaining the reader to me. So I have to acknowledge that this is not the reader, but this is somebody who is trying to explain the reader to me. If that's why, I mean, I feel that I cannot really quote what he really intended in a particular line. That I am quoting the line, but I also want to clarify what that quote means. But that understanding is not mine. That understanding is somebody else's. So either I write it as a quote from that author, or I say that this thing about the reader is quoted in another text. So quoted in is indirect source. Otherwise, we can clarify this in a note. We can say this either in the in-text citation, or we can write it in the end note. So again, now we have the script, when the script is different. We are now in India, we are coming into comparative literature, we are coming into translation studies, where we find that sometimes the original, like if you remember for the translation of Aristotle, for example, there was a whole lot of scholarly work going on, and different scholars were using the same script, but they were, they were translating, or they were the meanings that they were writing, the way they were interpreting a particular word was according to their own knowledge, according to their own language. So a word like catharsis, for example, also became a very debatable term. What exactly does it mean? So they would take that term catharsis in the Greek script and write it in the Greek script, so that people know that this is the term, and anybody else could, analyze it according to the way they understood that term. Whereas the translated term in English or any other language, or in Hindi or in Sanskrit, would be perhaps according to the knowledge system of that particular language. So when we have to write that script, so we write it in parentheses generally, and that is, I think, in Aristotelian criticism we do find this more often. So if you make it clear that quoted in is, we are quoting it. For example, when we say this person is quoting, then we do not need to write quoted in, because we are using the source here. Like Kennedy quoted Aeschylus: "In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." Here we do not write to say quoted in so and so, because we are citing that word, we are citing this work here at the end, and also the cite. Now, important again is the punctuation in citations. Lower punctuations come before the top ones. So here, this is again a mistake that happens, because we close the quotation or the term, and then we write the comma later, and later we spend a whole lot of time just editing these commas. As editors also, we find that a whole 1 hour is spent in an article of, say, even about 7-8 pages, in just putting that comma inside the in quotation marks. It's a very tiny thing, but it takes up a lot of time. So if we do this in the first instance, we wouldn't be doing so much corrections later. So here again, you see, you have the closing the parenthesis, and then the full stop comes after the parenthesis is closed. The yellow bracket is closed. So this is a way, I mean, we are so used to putting the full stop immediately after we finish a line. We just type full stop. It happens all the time. And then we are thinking and we forget. But this is something that we really need to work on. Now, the second one was, here, this is wrong. We've done the right thing. We put the full stop or the period before the inverted commas, but our writer, the in-text citation, has now gone outside. This is okay when we are doing an a longer in-text citation, but not like this. Indented citation, I mean, sorry. Now, notes are very, very important. And when we were writing our thesis earlier, it used to be very painful, because we had to write footnotes. But when I look at those that thesis with footnotes, I feel so good, because it gives a very, very academic, very research, very serious research look. But today, gratefully for us, MLA at least says it's better to do endnotes rather than footnotes. So now there are two kinds of notes. Bibliographic notes can help writers avoid cluttering the text or digressing from the paper's argument, as I said earlier. So sources, if they are cited within the text, they can be cited in the bibliographic notes have to be regarding the text that we are saying, but they have to be corresponding. So again, notes is a very, very painstaking, very, very painful thing. I generally, mark everything X. Whenever I have a footnote, I just mark it X, and I change the color of that X. So I have an X in red, and I have an X in green, and I have an X in red. And then at the end, I just put all those X's, the notes together, along with the footnote number 1, whatever X, red, a yellow X, and the name. I wish I had done it here. And then I'll put the note. Then I have a red X and I have the note. And then it's easier to number them here and then you number them in your text. So it is very painstaking, and I'm sure we all do it. But sometimes we avoid, when we are in a hurry to write an article, we avoid this because it sure takes a whole day. But it enriches our text, because it is, again, the mantra is clarity. We are making each and every point very, very clear to the reader, and we're not keeping anything to ourselves. So one of the things that I found, I was doing my thesis basically, and then when I was, sort of editing some of the scholars' thesis, what I found very, very clearly, one of the difficulties that was there was that there were so many things in my. I have already done my literature review. I've already identified the research gap, and now I'm reading to just find something which will, now collaborate my argument, which will augment my argument. And when I find something like that in a book, I quickly note it down along with the page number, everything. But sometimes the main argument, simple thing like I contest the idea that Coleridge's idea of imagination was totally dependent on the German translations. I just want to say that. I just want to contest that. I just want to say, I will not say that line, because that is where I began. Instead of saying that line, I'll go on saying so many things, but the major line which has to be there is in my mind. So my mind is already reading it alongside the text. And that very important line which should be there for the reader is not there. That is why sometimes another reader points it out to us before we send it for publication, that here, you're not making sense. So making clear, logical, the one line following the other logically, the paragraph following the one other paragraph logically, is so important that we may do away with in-text citations if we feel that it is, it's a very important point and the citations are breaking it up. So we can use these sources in all these ways. This is all in MLA. This is that you have number one EndNote, see this text, and you see this text because in this text, the point that I'm making will become clearer. Secondly, for a particular thing, now you can say that for sampling this, I have used this text. This idea has come to me from there. So EndNotes are sometimes more elaborate. So there is you have documented in a particular way sometimes, because sometimes we do find that a new kind of a challenge has come in for documentation. So there also we have to explain in an EndNote that citations of the Latin marginalia refer to Macaulay's edition of the poem and are cited by page number. Reference to the Middle English poem, cite Peck's edition by line number. So you know that you had to cite according to a convention, but you're not convinced that this convention will be read rightly by your reader. So you just write a note. So to flag editions and translations, again, to make clear that which edition you're using, you can again, these are the bibliographic notes are to clarify the text that you're using and the authorial points that you're making, which author has said this, which text has said this. So editions need this when more than one edition is there, and often to place a note in the text where the work is first quoted. The clearest method is often to place the note in the text where the work is first quoted. So otherwise, you will be always quoting multiple sources. So now, again, the note here is the translations of Usos Omorosos by Margaret Jones. All the translations are mine. You just made this note when there was something in the argument. So Topolino can be translated as scamp. You have translated it as one word, and now you're just saying it can be translated as scamp also. So you're just, making it clear so that the reader doesn't feel that your translation are up to the mark. Sometimes the note is that I have translated in such a way because I feel that it suits the context better, but the literal word is this. So EndNotes sometimes are wonderfully clarifying. Content notes, again, they offer the readers a commentary or information about the main text, about what you're writing, the content. This is not about the text. So this is to sometimes again amplify the idea that you were doing, to explain the word choice again that you're making, to justify the scope of the study, whether the Gawain poet might have written Saint Conwald is not pertinent to my argument. I'm just saying, some people say that Gawain the poet has been written by somebody else, but that that debate is not pertinent to my paper or my argument. So it's needless to come into that debate here. So you can, you're talking to the person when you're writing a paper, when you're writing a thesis, you're actually communicating with the person who's going to read it, the examiner or the reader, or your supervisor or the editor or whoever. And this communication, you have to, nothing should be left to for a telephonic conversation or for a WhatsApp message. What do you mean by this or that? You have to be as clear as possible. Most of the time, I feel that the difference I make is between communication and expression. Most of the time, or most of us, I know that I'm always doing it. I'm trying to express my own ideas. I'm just trying to first, unload my own mind, and I'm just trying to put there what I feel about it. So when I'm expressing myself, I have, my mind has already been communicating with myself, what we call intrapersonal communication. I know what I mean by it. But the second line is more important. The communication, the interpersonal communication is more important. My mind knows it, I know it. But will another person who reads it understand it the way I mean it? So to make that person understand, I have to go the whole hog. I have to write on all these details, which is why these endnotes come in handy. So you give more examples. You say, I'm writing this, for example, other authors have also written the same point as in nationalism and minor literature. Also, the argument is the same. Today, because of, APA style sheet, what a lot of social sciences people do is they write multiple citations. And in literature also, it has become the norm because it seems very impressive that to write just a simple thing like India is an ancient civilization. Everybody knows it. So you can write 10 citations for that. And you just say, Nehru, 12, Gandhi, 1. Then you have your, all those Germans, Husserl, this, Jones, page 84. You have multiple citations saying something which is so sort of universally true. Or you can use endnotes. So whichever is better, endnotes seem maturer and multiple citations seem very impressive. So one can choose what one wants to do there. Now you want to give counter examples. You've given an example in your argument, but you want to also say something else. If you say it within the text, it'll take a whole paragraph and it may take away from your argument. So you advance an alternative thesis, you can advance an alternative idea, but you can do it in the endnotes. You can just say that this person says something else, but that is not the point I'm making. So to identify comment or allusions also, anything that you're using just to elaborate on that. Then you can say that I'm just taking a one point. However, in the note that there are many other points that can be made. So you can identify authors, you can acknowledge authors in endnotes, and you can also do it for attention. So the note section can be called note section or endnotes. That's what MLA says, and you can always do this, and it has to be in number. Now, where to place the notes? Note numbers in the text are generally placed after a mark of punctuation. Again, like I said, the full stops and the indentation, the inverted commas. We always, when we are typing, we are making this quickly. We are writing a full stop or something, and then later it remains. So this is one of these very delicate maneuvers that we have to do. That we have to place them at the end of the sentences as it is, here. Here, incendio. Young visits the Hogwarts, learn how to throw flames by encanting incendio. And here you have the end note. Now the dash is an exception. This one is placed after the end note here. This is the end note 4. Oh, sorry. So this 4 is the end note and the dash comes after that. In your writing, if you're finishing it, yes, it will come after your in quotation marks, but before a dash. If clarity demands that note be placed somewhere other than at the end of the sentence, or if the sentence requires more than one note, then you have to find the least distracting, unambiguous spot. The least distracting, unambiguous spot. So the whole idea of referencing is to acknowledge, and the whole idea of choosing the best way of acknowledging referencing is to avoid distraction, most important, and ambiguity. So while literature benefits from ambiguity, while poetry Creative writing benefits from ambiguity. Communication suffers from when it is ambiguous. Communication has to be unambiguous. So a research paper is definitely not um, uh, a creative piece. It is meant to unravel the ambiguity anywhere. You are actually undoing what the poet has been, at pains to do. Sometimes one feels it's like, God, a human body has been created and it was so beautiful and all those organs are hidden inside it, and you just see the outside, which is so beautiful and so well made. You don't even know how the machinery is working, and then there is a post-mortem, or there's the operation. You just take off the skin and you look at all the organs inside, and they're not as attractive as the beautiful skin that is outside. So a poem you read, and as a reader you can understand most of the things, but in order to explain it or to write something about it, or to say, oh, Eliot has written all this to universalize the idea of man, or or he's a misogynist or something like that. So you are researching to take away the ambiguity which the poor man was at such pains to do, so that he is able to say what he says without being ready to kill him for it. But in research we are just doing that. We don't kill him, but we sort of take him apart in order to show that here he was being very clever, but we've undone him. But our piece has to be totally unambiguous. So, how to place a note mid-sentence for clarity of citations. Despite Frederick Jameson's influential imperative to historicize five, now when you write an endnote like that, you can carry on with the sentence, and it's very clear. So you have one in-text citation saying page number for Chakrabarti, but you didn't want to have too many citations here, so you made one line note to clarify the point and one page number. So placement of more than one note in a sentence. So here again, you put in the square parenthesis. You use double parenthesis. So Shakespeare rehearsal, which he says knocked the spots out of any acting ever I see before. So here it is 2A, and you put a footnote. And a note. Okay. So the whole idea for research is that you have, first of all, identified an area about which you want to write. And what I used to find very, very difficult when I began to write or a research paper was that there were so many ideas floating around, so many seminars happening, and suddenly somebody sends you, a call for papers, and you're so tempted because it is something that you've read, it's something that you're interested in, and you immediately start, looking for a paper, and that you see the time is only about 2 months, but you know that you can write that paper, you can appear in that seminar, and you will present a paper. What is lacking in most of the researches that we are able to do, it's not that we don't want to, it's that we are able to do in our Indian universities, is that we normally do not have good libraries. Our libraries sometimes do not have access to good e-journals, and sometimes, of course, the internet is not working these days. Earlier also, like the Central University of Jammu, because it's just about 10 years old, we spent a lot of time making the library there, and sometimes because of whatever the norms, you couldn't have certain books, and for literature you do need books that are printed abroad, and they are in dollars or in pounds, and sometimes the library stipulation would be that you can't have books in foreign currency, things like that. So research, we are not able to do it because of this kind of very narrow view of our administration, or some of the people who make these rules. So that is where our very ardent spirit, our very important researcher spirits meets our first block, the first roadblock. Whereas, and most of these people, when they look at your papers, look at my papers, and they say, "आपने ये क्या किया? 3-4 papers पढ़े और उसको जोड़ के आपने लिख दिया," something like that. That you're just cutting, pasting, and writing, or copying, pasting, and just adding one idea. So how do we, as researchers, as faculty members, as people who are supposed to be doing new work, how do we tell them that whatever we are doing, it's a stepwise growth? We start with our MA intertextual answer papers, and then we are left alone to flounder with our proposals, with which we have to step into our PhDs. And in our PhDs also, because of lack of books, lack of material, you have no choice but, during your synopsis, you have no choice but to read very, a lot of books, but rapidly. You cannot have, it's a wide reading, it's not an in-depth reading, which is what you need to do, because those books are not available there, those texts are not available so many times. Now in literature we are required to research on newer books, newer texts, newer theories, but we don't have the texts. So obviously that is one very important hindrance that we suffer from. That's a huge obstacle. But given that, whenever we have a seminar which is coming up close, and we know that it's an important seminar, you can do it. It's important to, first of all, spend one whole day doing only the literature review. If you have a month, spend a whole week just reading about the topic. What are the papers, what are the books, what are the theses, what are the things that are written about it. That itself will be half your paper. If you are, you are just putting it in your paper, I'm putting it in my paper, that I have gone through so many papers, and I find that this topic has not been really viewed in this perspective. Most of the people are very traditional, or they're just archiving it. But when you look at it through this particular viewpoint, which the seminar is offering, for example, you can, instead of looking at um, all these texts that Ghosh is writing, his latest text. You can look at The Hungry Tide as an ecological text now, and you can use the latest text that he's written about the planet, and you can use this text to illuminate his idea in The Hungry Tide also. So just by reading one more theoretical work, you have just added to, that um, and the views that you had about The Hungry Tide. So either the latest that has come up, that latest book which has come out of an author, which can help you understand his earlier work or her earlier work, or you can, do a thorough review of a very old text. If you're taking up an old text, and you suddenly have an insight that, my God, nobody's looked at it from this point of view, then you have to first say that it has been researched from a lot of points of view, but this point of view is new. So definitely, about two-fifths or one-fifth of your paper is literature review. So if you've done that, that means you one-fifth of your paper is already ready, and that is the literature review is the place where I found myself lacking. And now when I have scholars, that is the place where we are telling, in Indian universities most of the time, this view of literature was not review was not really possible, because I said there were not enough books or enough um, um material. But thanks to now the internet and so many e-resources, it's easier, and MLA 9th has made it very, very easy to cite any kind of source. You can cite interviews, you can cite blogs, you can cite newspaper articles. And like though I didn't, I thought I'll put all of them there, but then, you're just, it confuses us, it confuses me to see on the screen again and again the same kind of text at italics and inverted commas and all, and then just saying कि इसको यहाँ से हिला दो, just move one thing from the other, and that's it. It boggles your mind. So one by one, when we need to go to citation for our own reference, first of all, just sort of think that if I have to go back and have to find out where I got this quotation from, what am I going to look at? So what is your starting point? You alphabetically put the name of the uh, author, if you remember the author. Or if it's the Hindu, then you write for yourself, you write the Hindu. So you know that when you look at the Hindu, you'll remember the name of the article. But when you're citing it, just you have to check that the name of the article comes first, if it is not by any uh, particular person, and it's just the a news item that is appeared there without any acknowledgement of the author. So not the Hindu. The Hindu will come in the running, in the commas and all at the end, but the article will come first. So sometimes when you know the author will come first, and then the article is the same. Only the address changes. Only the publication details change, or the page number and all those things change. But one can cite anything and everything, including, you can cite seminars, you can cite conversations, you can cite class lectures. So many times we are taking ideas from so many professors whose workshops and FDPs we attend, and we do quote them sometimes to say that this is the point that uh, that professor has made. Like I've been doing a lot of attending a lot of translation seminars or workshops. So there, I saw that the point of Ipshita Chanda, the Professor Ipshita Chanda, in one about multilingualism was so important. In another, I read an interview by or an article by Professor Desh Kumar Singh, and when I met him, I asked him that question. He answered it. So all those things you can put together, and you can just cite in conversation with the person on this topic on so and so date or so and so year during a seminar. You can cite anything and everything. It will give an authority, a heaviness, a depth to your work, and it will also save you from any kind of plagiarism, or as most of the time people are saying, oh, this was my idea, you just stolen it. So the idea of not stealing but acknowledging the idea wherever it came from. So many of our ideas are also serendipity. They're so common, and there is also what you call the there's this psychic unity of the universe. At one point, sometimes everybody is thinking the same thing. So though that also happens. Thirdly, what I've since I've started researching the mythology and looking at some Indian texts, I find that there are certain translations, certain translators, certain philosophers, certain scientists who say that I find the idea in the Upanishads to be very important, who say that I found this particular sentence in the Purana and I found it very important. So they acknowledge it, that it has come from there. But most of the Western philosophy that we've read, for example, Emerson's essays that we read in when we study American literature, most of those essays are so inflected with the idea of the Upanishads and the Vedantas and Confucius Buddhism, that you don't know whether you're reading an English text or you're reading your own Eastern text. But there is no acknowledgement because there was no copyright for these universal or these such broad spread ideas. So today we are required to even acknowledge that. So we ourselves have to find out some new ways of citing things or referencing to things that may not have you know any reference right in the MLA or APA, whatever we are doing. So sometimes we have to innovate and acknowledge that this is something that I've come across, and I'm citing it like this. I couldn't find any other way of citing it. So I we have to. I was afraid I would take up more time, and I think I did. Um, yes, sir. Uh, yeah, yes, 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 Amuda. Would you like to share this PPT? Would you like to have it? Okay, I'll send it. I'll send it to them. Is there anything else anybody would like to know? I think I would like some views. I mean, because this was a very interesting session for me, because though I was taking classes for PhD students so many times, but research methodology and citation, I would always tell my head that this is one paper I do not want to teach because this is unending and this is so difficult, because even when you're writing your own papers, it is very very difficult to know exactly how to cite. So my most important bit of advice at the end of all this is that your Bible is your citation sheet, whichever you're using, either AP or MLA, and it has to be there, and whenever you are at a loss, kindly cross check. It is so elaborate and it's so comprehensive. Yes, Dr. Maulan.
I actually just want to know if anybody they have any questions, the participants. Participants, do you have any questions, any queries to ask? Ma'am, I can see here one question in the chat box. Can you suggest Scopus Index Journal for English Literature?
Yes, there is one which is by there is this I think the Dibrugarh journal is I think Scopus as well as our UGC care list. That's one which is really good. Several of the others like Dialogue, which is Punjab University, they were good, and but now I'm also revisiting this. So this is a list I'm making myself, and I'm glad you asked this question because all of us are now searching for these newer lists because the older lists are all being scrapped. And but this one, the Dibrugarh journal, is good. And I think the comparative literature Jadavpur is also, I think, Scopus indexed. But I'll look at it again. I'm not very sure right now because there's so many changes happening. So yes, I'll respect your question, and I'll now hurry up with this list. And I think I'll share it with you. I'll send it to sir. I'll send it to ma'am if she, and then um, I'll
All right,
take note. I'll take note.
all right, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you very much for the wonderful session that